Hi, this is Blanca, and I was tagged by Sue Lee.
Okay, I'm going to be inserting some photos here while I speak. The first question is, what part of the world are you growing your orchids in? I grow my orchids here in St. Petersburg, Florida, USA. We live between the Tampa Bay and the Gulf of Mexico, so it's a subtropical area and it's pretty mild here. So we've had some winter temperatures at night. It's usually like in the 50s, but it can go lower than that to the 40s, and I believe pretty close to the high 30s. And in the day, it's back up to the 60s and the 70s. Now in the summer here, it's very hot in the high 80s and the 90s. All right, moving along. Question number 2. How long have you been growing orchids? And can you remember which was your very first orchid? Plus, have you still got it? I've been growing orchids for about 9 or 10 years, and I've been growing them on my own. I don't belong to any orchid clubs or societies, and what I've learned from orchids is from some books and lately from YouTube. But I do plan to join an orchid society. And my first orchid was a big white phalaenopsis, and I believe it had a purple lip. Very pretty phalaenopsis. I was so attracted to her. I brought her home, and I didn't know anything about orchids. Do I still have her? No. Sad to say, she drowned. I overwatered her. Okay, moving right along. Question number 3. What first got you into the orchid growing hobby? I remember many years ago when I was young, they used to hold the orchid shows inside the malls, and they would bring in hundreds of displays, and I would walk around and look at the orchids and just admire them. And then I look at the people that were buying and the people that were selling, and I just didn't dare buy an orchid because I didn't know a thing about them. And honestly, I felt very intimidated, like it wasn't for me. Okay, that wasn't the question. All right, let's see, the question was what first got you into the orchid growing hobby? Okay, it was a co-worker. I used to work for a engineering and surveying firm, and there was an employee there that was a surveyor, and he grew orchids, and he would bring them into the office and display them. And one of the orchids that I really fell in love with was Dancing Lady. He pointed it out to me, and I really wanted that orchid. He did sell orchids, but he would not sell that one. It was mounted and it had like hundreds of blooms on it, but he wouldn't sell that one. So one day he gave me an orchid, a cattleya. He gave it to me for free, and it was a purple cattleya, and I had it for a little while, and it was blooming when he gave it to me, but then it turned yellow, and I didn't know what was wrong with it, and most of the leaves had turned yellow. So I brought it back in, and I said, "What's wrong with my orchid?" He looked at it, he goes, "Oh my God, you better throw it away. That thing is full of scale." The scale were eating my orchids, and I didn't know what was wrong with it, and I just kept watering it and bathing the scales, and they were having a good old time on feasting on my orchid. Michael started working in the office very early, and I would come in the morning and look to see if he had a new orchid displaying in the lobby. And I started buying orchids from him, and then it became an addiction, and I was always after him. "Do you have a pink one? Do you have an orange one? Bring me a purple one." And I mean, it was like he was my supplier. He was my pusher, and I kept buying orchids from him till I started filling up my screen porch. So that's how I started my orchid hobby, and he started teaching me about how to grow them, and basically how to water them and spray them for pests. Okay, moving along. Let's see, question number 4. What kind of growing space do you have? Oh boy, that's like a loaded question. Originally it started out my screen porch. I started growing them all in my screen porch, and my screen porch started filling up with orchids, and it was really a lot of work for me to water them because I had a little red wagon, and I would take turns. I would load up the wagon with maybe 10-12 orchids, and I would take them out to the side and put them out on the side and water them outside, and then I let them drain, bring that group back into the screen porch, load up the wagon again, and take another load out. And I did this about 3 or 4 times on the weekends, and possibly twice a week, and it was a lot of work. But what happened was that the screen porch had orchids dangling. I had orchids on tables, I had orchids on the floor, and we had a nice glass table with 4 chairs, and the orchids started moving into the table. Now the table got full of orchids, and the chairs, I used them for stands too for my orchids. And one day my husband said, that's it, they got to go, your orchids got to go outside. We can't even enjoy this porch anymore. We can't even come out here and sit down and eat or do anything out here. It's hard to even get around here. So that's when I had to come up with something, because I could not get rid of my orchids, and I certainly wasn't going to put them outside in the sun. So that weekend, I needed a fix. I needed another orchid. So hubby's really good. He takes me anywhere where I want to go to see orchids or buy orchids, and he took me that weekend to Artstone. It's a orchid vendor here in St. Petersburg. So as we arrived there, they had this really pretty little brown lattice house. It was a pergola, and I asked them, where did they get the house from? And she told me, oh, we have a guy that builds them, Frank. And she said if I was interested, she would give me his business card. Well, I got my orchid, and on the way home, I called his number. That evening, Frank was at my house, and he brought me a photo album of all the pergolas he has built. And they were very nice, but I wanted a white one. So that is how the pergola was born. So this is my pergola, my number 1 growing space. Oh, I got this branch from my foxtail tree in the way when I opened the doors. I don't want to trim it yet, but I'll have to figure out what to do. But this is my growing space. And I've shown this space many times before. There are wooden shelves. They are kind of warped. So I try to put my orchids like in wooden baskets so they don't fall over, or some heavy pots, until I can replace the shelves. And then there is another shelf that I put there temporarily. And there's one shelf back there that my husband rebuilt for me, and it's nice and firm and steady. Then I have orchids dangling up here from it's PVC pipe. And the back of the pergola has an opening because I used to work back there. I had a little bench made, and I used to clean my orchids and just work back there. But the sun was so bright in the morning that I had to put some shade cloth so my orchids wouldn't get burned. And these just keep getting bigger and bigger, these buds. Look at that. I'll show you how big they are. Here's my hand. Here's her label. I don't quite remember what she is right now, but after this video I'm sure I'll record her and I'll remember her. And that's the other side. I have when the pergola was built, my husband ran water underground with PVC pipe, and he put a valve there, and he put a garden hose up here, and I have it hanging right there. so it's just really easy to water my orchids. And it's kind of packed in here now. I need to somehow get in here and rearrange all these shelves, or rearrange the orchids. I have a variety of orchids in here. So I love my little pergola. I kind of wish sometimes it was a little bigger, but that's fine. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that when my youngest brother comes over, he calls my pergola the what is it? Oh, the orchid jail. Another growing space I have, it's an arbor that I had built on the side of the house to hang my vandas. And it's right under the mango tree. The problem was that the mango tree gave me too much shade. It grew so quickly that the vandas were not getting any sun in there. So I moved most of the vandas out, and I keep my windowsills there, and also some other type of cattleyas in there. So that's one growing space, or second growing space. And then my third growing space, I'm kind of ashamed to show it to you because it's an ugly spot, but it's my my hospital area, my ICU. It's for my sick orchids, and I bring them over here when I don't want them to infect another orchid, and they get filter sun here, and I treat them over here. And that's an area I usually don't show because it's not that pretty of a place. And then finally, the last place I had shared with you before is the eaves on my house. I decide, since the vandas were not getting enough sun there, I decide to move them over to the gutters, and they're hanging there, and that's much better for them. It's easier to water, and they do get filtered light, and they are doing well there. So that's the other growing spot. Okay, moving along. Question number 5. How many different types of genera of orchids do you grow, and what are they? I believe I have like 17 genera, and most of them are cattleyas, dendrobiums, windowsills, chambrochias, and cyclias, and catasetums. I have a bronanthera that does not bloom. I have a phaeus, a warm growing cymbidium that will not bloom, lycaste, phalaenopsis, and back there my very first pathopedium. Sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Oncidiums, chisis, Miltonia, vandas, and finally one very rare odd orchid, very difficult to find, Blancadodium. Just kidding, I made that up. There's no such thing, so don't look it up. It's just to see if you're still following and awake. All right, moving along. Question number 6. Do you actually know how many orchids you have, roughly? No, I don't know. That depends who you ask. If you ask hubby, he would say about 50 or 60, because I've heard him tell other people, oh, she's got about 50 orchids, and I just silently nod my head yes and grin, and that's that's a secret. But anyways, I grow them in my screen porch outside, and I have not counted them all. But I did start counting the ones in the screen porch, and I counted 77 in there. In the pergola, I have not counted them. I have not counted the ones outside in the arbor, along the fence, on the side of the yard, and under the eaves. But honestly, I would say about 250 plus, give or take. But I don't want hubby to know that, because he might have a conniption, or he might just say, that's it for you, no more orchids. Or worse, he may start smoking again. Oh God. All right, moving along. Question number 7. What would be the one thing that you could say was your top orchid gripe, peeve? I would say is when you order an orchid online, and usually from eBay vendors, and they sometimes don't show you the photo of the orchid that you will be receiving, or if they do, it's a close up and it appears to be a large orchid. And when you receive it, it's usually a lot smaller than the photograph. And the other thing is, they sometimes call them blooming size, and when you get them, you know they're not going to be blooming size. It's going to be a while before they bloom. I think it's pretty deceitful. Okay, moving along. Question number 8. What are your favorite places to buy orchids and least favorite? Well, my favorite places is usually at the orchid shows and sales, because I like to buy blooming orchids, so I know exactly what I'm getting. And I also like to buy, we have a festival here in St. Petersburg every year. It's called Green Thumb Festival, and they bring a lot of orchids out to the park. I love buying orchids there. I bring my wagon and I load it up. And then I also like buying orchids at the flea market. And the one place, oh, there's another place. We have a lot of orchid nurseries around here, and they are usually closed to the public, but a couple times a year, maybe 3 times a year, they are open, and they have open houses, and you can go through their nurseries and buy orchids then. I really enjoy that. And the least favorite, eBay. Okay, moving along here. Question number 9. Let's see, I'm reading them here. What is the worst orchid advice you have ever been given, and did you take that advice? Yes, I did. And it was, we have reclaimed water here and in my neighborhood, and it's water that has been, it's used water that comes out of your house, and it's been processed and cleaned. And someone once told me that's the best water for orchids, that there's a lot of nutrients in it, and I believed them. And I set up like an old bird cage outside, and I went ahead and those are the sprinklers. They pop out and they spray the lawn. And I went ahead and set up the some orchids out here, and let them get sprayed by the reclaimed water, and it basically killed the orchids. I think the content in the content of salt in the water was too high for the orchids. And then the other thing is, someone once told me that the vandas can take 24, not 24, but can take full sun in Florida. And did I take it? Yes. Was it wrong? Right. Our sun here is so strong that you put orchids out here, vandas or any type, and they're out here in the sun for, I would say about 12, 13 hours a day. Seems more like 20, but, and it'll make toast out of them. And moving right along, number 10, out of the orchids you own, which are the 5 favorite orchids? That's really a difficult question because they are all my favorites. Okay, if I had to pick 5, I would have to say my new Cattleya, George King, Serendipity, and I'll insert photos of these orchids. And number 2, Alcea purpurata. And number 3, Peach Rhynchostylis. And number 4, my new Newtonia sunset yellow passion. And finally, number 5, it's a big one, it's the Cattleya amethoglossum. All right, moving right along here. Question number 10. Oh, I did number 10. Let's go to number 11. Okay, have you got an orchid related story? Funny, interesting, or sad? Yes, I do. It's rather funny. Over a year ago, a few years ago, we went down to South Florida to visit a friend who had had some surgery and was home from the hospital. And on the way there, I stopped at a very nice, it was like a silk garden store, and I decided to bring her a phalaenopsis. It was a silk phalaenopsis, a fake one, okay, but it was beautiful. It was white with a yellow lip, and she might have had like about 3 bloom spikes. She was very tall, and she had branching out, and she looked so real. In fact, I pay more for her than what I do on some of my orchids. So anyways, I took it to her, and she was very happy with it. She knew it was silk. And a few weeks went by, and maybe about a month, I called back to see how she was doing, and her husband picked up the phone, and he said, "Oh my God, Blanca, that orchid is so beautiful. I keep it out in the lanai, and I water it about maybe once a week. Sometimes I water it, every 3 weeks, because she doesn't seem to dry out so quick." I died laughing. He thought it was real, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him the truth that it wasn't real. So anyways, a few months went by, and I called again to check on her, and I talked to him again, and he goes, "That orchid is still just as beautiful as day one." And finally my husband called him back and says, "Hey, look here, that orchid, quit watering it, it's fake." So that's my orchid story. Okay, so moving right along, number 12. What advice would you give someone to start growing orchids and building up a collection? Well, most of the good advice has already been given out. So I would probably say that if you're going to start growing orchids, don't get disappointed if they die. Be very patient, because I have orchids that don't bloom yearly. Some do bloom a few times a year, but then I also have orchids that haven't bloomed in the last 6 years, and I have like 3 of those. And the other advice I would say would probably be that if you're going to start the orchid collection, get a buddy or someone that will take care of your orchids. If you go on vacation, get someone that will take care of your orchids and water them for you. What I do is I make a little video, and I show my brother how I water my orchids, which ones I water daily. And when I'm gone, I can count on him. I know that he's taking good care of my orchids. So that would be the advice I would give him. And okay, moving along, number 13. That's it. There's no 13. Okay, this is the fun part. This is where I get to name or tag the next 2 people. Okay, number 1, I would tag Crazy Orchid Lady. Well, I'm new to her channel. She is a neighbor. She lives here in Florida, and I do enjoy watching her videos. You've been tagged. And then the other person I want to name is Lady Green Thumb, and she is up north, and she has a huge collection of orchids, and I really would love to know how she got started. And if you've been named, I'm sorry about that. And if you have not been named, I'll be back. I'll be searching for you. Okay, and I think that's a wrap. Oh, there is one other thing I want to add. Sorry the video was so long, and I want to say thank you to hubby for helping me put the video together. He was not too happy with the count of orchids, but he'll survive. And I just want to say that if you like the video, click thumbs up or subscribe. And thank you for watching.
Phenomena.